I recall crying in my yearly appraisal meeting with my supervisor and my manager. It all just felt so terrifying, so unpredictable and so unknown. My manager is a lovely guy, but he really didn't know what to do with this strong, independent, self-assured psychologist who was suddenly a blubbering wreck. Yep, grief will do that to you. So yeah, I don't usually cry in sessions with patients either. I have done sometimes with people. You know, it's okay to cry with people. Crying likes company sometimes, doesn't it? So Dad was toing and froing between home and the hospital a fair bit between July and November. In the past, it had always been Mum suggesting that they go to the doctor, and Dad insisting he'd be okay. However, in November, Dad said to Mum, "Take me to hospital," and he never came home again. I found myself wondering if he knew that would be the last time he would be in his home. The home he'd lived in since 1988, where he'd moved in with a 9-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. That's me, I'm her. The home they had extended twice, and Mum is currently extending again, actually, which has happened since this book was published, where he had started his business, tinkering with countless vintage motorbikes, and raised their children into young adults, where he welcomed 3 grandchildren. Perhaps he did realise, but he was certainly too unwell to be overly sentimental about it. Mum started a pattern of visiting Dad daily, and I would visit at weekends, as I was working 3 days a week and looking after my almost 18-month on my days off. I can't see, there's a tear in my eye on the line corner. On my days off, where's that bit? I decided not to take my children into hospital with me because I knew full well that hospitals are boring to young children. So I would get childcare when available and visit when I could. I lived 40 miles away from the hospital, so it wasn't an easy juggle with work and a young family. During November and December, I continued to go to work. I was experiencing acute stress. I was tearful and experiencing poor short-term memory. I was terrified of him dying and what it would be like when he did. I was imagining all those dreadful outcomes involving painful screaming and terror, or my worst case scenario, that I would miss it, or he'd be alone when he died. I carried on going to work because we had no idea how long it would all take. As it turned out, I went to work on the 8th of December, but I didn't go back. That evening, I was eating dinner around the table with my husband. Oh, I won't manage this bit. Let's try, shall we? Eating dinner around the table with my husband and 2 children, and my mobile rang, and it was Mum. "They've decided to withdraw IV fluid," she said, and the sound of the hollowed out keening. "No," I responded with, still haunts me to this day. To me, you can live 3 days without food, 3 days without water, and 3 minutes without air. He'd already gone a few weeks without food, and so I thought I was being given just 3 days left with my wonderful dad being on planet Earth with me. It felt like I'd been ripped into pieces. Should we have another drink? I should have. Oh, I've got an extra pint of water. What are the chances? Grief starts early when someone has a terminal illness. Since he'd been palliatively diagnosed in December 2016, it was not uncommon to find me sobbing by myself, with tears coursing down my face or collapsed in a heap on the office floor as my husband cuddled me, or me crying myself to sleep. Well, after that phone call, all of those behaviours skyrocketed. I was just a mess. I was like this most of the time. I would visit Dad daily. My car was drinking diesel like it was going out of fashion, and I was mentally and physically exhausted. I wish I'd stopped work sooner. Whilst Dad was still able to walk and to talk freely without him having to nap so often. By the time I stopped work, Dad was stuck in the hospital bed and spent a great deal of my visits asleep whilst I held his hand. I've long hated my weird little wrists. If you ever meet me, you'll now see my wrists and conclude for yourself that they are indeed strangely knobbly. It was when I was sitting holding his hand in his final days that I realised that my wrists, yeah, how weird, aren't they? That my wrists are a carbon copy of my dad's. So now, almost 3 years on, exactly 3 years on today, I get a strange sense of connectedness and of life going on from my own knobbly wrists. Anyway, I've digressed. I do that. I wish I'd thought to take his old childhood and family photos into hospital to share with him one last time when he was still well enough to enjoy them and to reminisce for the last time. I am, however, grateful that I was able to be honest with my dad about my feelings around his imminent departure. I cried a fair bit in front of him. It'll be surprise you, that won't it? And I don't regret that at all. I needed him to know that this was a big deal. I know from my work that it's okay to talk about feelings and to show them people and to show them. So it was that a few days before he passed, Dad was talking to me and he said, I wish I'd tried harder in school. My poor dad was lying, preparing to die, and was clearly running through his life and thinking what life would have been like if things had been different. I think I'm actually pretty pleased that all he could come up with in terms of regret, that's all he could come up with in terms of regret. To me, at the time, though, it was a surprise. I'd always been incredibly proud of the self-employed businessman he was, and to think he was thinking that he hadn't achieved his full potential was a shock. He did also seem sad, though, when he said, my dad died at 73. I'm 71. I thought with modern medicine, I'd get a bit longer. I have to confess that I'd hoped the same. I was 7 when my grampy died, and I was gutted. I continued to be throughout my life, but never really shared it with anyone, and I didn't want to worry my granny. Growing up, I'd often compare my dad's age to 73 and try to reassure myself that I still had ages of dad time left. I think now how much I would have loved those 2 years where he could have enjoyed his grandchildren, some more holidays, and many, many more cups of tea. In contrast, 73 would have been great. Let's have a little drink. Are you all crying with me, or are you like, what is she doing? What is she up to? Dad had decided that he wanted to die in a hospice and not in the hospital or at home. With hindsight, I'm glad it wasn't the family home, because I think I might have struggled to adjust thereafter. Who knew that December is such a popular time to die, though? It meant that the hospices were all full. If you're finding that yourself currently, I'm very sorry, because it's hard. Christmas music playing constantly. Not in the hospices, they don't do that. That would be really mean. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time piped into every room. I don't think that would be very nice. Who knew that December is such a popular time to die, though? So every day for a couple of weeks, I would telephone the admissions department of our preferred lakeside hospice and ask if there was a space for my dad. There wasn't. I'm pretty sure that the Macmillan nursing team and hospital team were also calling the hospice too, but I felt like it was something I could control in a mad situation which felt out of control. And on the 18th of December, we were notified that our second favourite hospice, honestly, who knew you could have a favourite hospice, had a space for Dad and he would be transferred that day. We waited. We waited some more. We waited some more. And in the end, Dad told us to go home. He'd be okay, and we'd see him tomorrow. So it was that my dad took a trip through the Northamptonshire countryside lanes, alone, in the back of a patient transport ambulance. What I didn't know was that this poor, sweet, terminally ill man, who hadn't been out of bed for weeks, hadn't been booked a bed transfer by the hospital. Instead, he was transferred 45 minutes in the back of a dark ambulance in an upright wheelchair, feeling scared that he was going to fall out, not having the strength to hold himself upright, and feeling every bump in the road from his now very slim frame. And after he passed, I made a complaint to the hospital, and they investigated and got back to me to apologise. That should never have happened. They shouldn't have allowed him to be transferred in a wheelchair. They said they would ensure it didn't happen again, but I found it hard to shift that image of my dad. being scared and alone in the back of an ambulance on his last trip anywhere. Let's see how many pages we've got left to get through. God, why did I make this so long? What is wrong with me? I guess I didn't realise I'd be reading it live on his anniversary. Dad arrived in the hospital shortly before. If you've got to leave, like, I'll understand. My battery might die before I get through this.